And we need my slides, Chris, when you have a chance. Okay, can you all hear me in the back? Okay. As Chris gets the slides up, yes, I was a slow learner. Took me 8 years to figure out how to get out of college, and it's taking me 8 years to figure out how to retire. My first 2 degrees were in wildlife ecology, and my topic area was actually white-tailed deer, which was very fortunate because there were no jobs, and I had to switch my training over to animal nutrition and forage management. So it was a small step to go from white-tailed deer to sheep, cattle, and goats, and just to change the forages a little bit. And as some of you may know, that deer do like alfalfa, so that part wasn't a big change. So what's living in my pasture? We're harvesting sunlight. I'd like everybody to wave to me for a minute. Now, I know I may be asking you to exercise here, but so wave at me. And now I want you to look at the back of your hand. Now, where did that energy come from? Originally, what was the source of that energy that's in your body that allows you to wave your hand? Okay, food. Let's keep going back. Pardon me, sir? Sunshine. The sunshine's coming down to the plant, which depends on which food you're eating. If it's lettuce, you're eating it directly. If it's wheat in your bread or in your donut, it made the seed, and then we ground the seed and made flour. And I just want you to remember that you are solar powered. Okay? You are the original Tesla. Okay? Now, I like to think of it in this format. We've got the sunshine, which, these are production centers. Forage growth is a production center. Forage utilization, animal, and then marketing. And then as a business, we're trying to turn that into cash. But the other reason I wanted you to do that little exercise, did you ever have an aunt or a grandmother that said, "Good morning, sunshine"? So I'm saying that to you. Good morning, sunshine. Now, something I want you to remember is that nutrients cycle, but solar energy flows through the ecosystem. You as managers are controlling the feed and feeding of all the pasture critters. You plan the menu, you set the table, and then there's the old saying, feed them and they will come. And that is really the foundation of ecology. If you have the right food source there and set up the right environment, then you do have to have an initial population. It may be real small, but then that population will grow. Soil organic matter is the basic food for the herd in the soil. And we look at different types of soil organic matter. The ones that you and I are going to see readily are plant residues, the dead plant material, and we usually call that coarse organic matter. Within the soil, we have the active organic matter. This would be, well, I'm going to bring out the analogy. Think about the rumen in a cow or sheep, and then think about the soil. They actually work pretty much identically, okay? And so, I'm going to use the rumen as the example. If a cow eats some grass, we've got some bacteria in there that like to digest the sugars and starches in that grass. We have another set of bacteria that will So think of that sugar and starches as the very active organic matter. Then we have slowly digested organic matter. That would be the fiber, in the forage. That other class of fiber digesting bacteria consume. And you have those same classes in the soil. And we'll use nylon bags in rumens to test the digestibility of forage. If you take those same bags and put them out in the soil, you see the same effect. No, it's a different rate, because you think about it, in the rumen, the temperature in the rumen is, I've forgotten the exact temperature. What is it, Mike? 104 Fahrenheit. But anyway, it's around 100 degrees, whereas in the soil, depends on the time of the year, it could be down in the 50s, 60s, or it could be up in the 80s. But it's more similar than dissimilar. Then this stable or passive organic matter used to be called humus. That term's still used. That's the bottom line. It's there. It helps a lot. It helps with cation exchange capacity, soil structure, and things like that. But I just wanted to introduce you to what we're working with here. Bear with me. Okay, there's the little the biomass of organisms above ground and within the soil. I'm going to use the example of a beef cow-calf pair. This cow-calf pair needs 3 acres of land to feed it for a 12-month program. At any point in time, I've got around 400 to 600 pounds of beef cattle per acre. At a point in time when they go into a new pasture, they've got around 2,500 pounds of forage in front of them. Think of that 2,500 pounds as basically pasture that's 10 inches tall. Okay? Now, a good rule of thumb is, we're going to have as much root growth on that forage as we have top growth. So that's why we say the root biomass is around 2,500 pounds. Now, bacteria, you've all heard of that. You may not have heard of it. Actinomycetes. Back when I was a young person, they were just called bacteria. But they are a little different. They're kind of halfway between a bacteria and a fungus. They've got a cell wall like a fungus, but other than that, they're like a bacteria. And so they've been separated out as a different class of organism since I took biology as a freshman in college. But notice how much of that, almost as much as we have roots and top growth. Fungus, even more. Then we have a whole bunch of other critters here, and we'll talk about them, but I'm going to jump down here to earthworms. Notice earthworms are about as much as the cattle up on top. And you're going to see that I'm a strong proponent of earthworms, okay? So there are cattle. This is happens to be dry cows after the calves have been weaned off of them. And there's that, roughly 2,500 pounds of forage in the pasture. Now, something that is beneficial is plant diversity. We'd like to have grasses, legumes, and non-leguminous forbs in our pasture. Grasses are the foundation of our pasture. A good quality grass does have sugar, starch, and high quality fiber in it. The important factor for grass, in my opinion, is sod formation. Some grasses like Tall fescue, bluegrass, bentgrass, and Bermuda grass are good sod formers. Orchard grass by itself is not a good sod former, and it needs bluegrass in with it. Legumes, of course, are very important for nitrogen fixation. You're going to hear about the price of nitrogen later today. And to me, okay, my philosophy and my recommendation is try to get where you can run your system on legumes providing the nitrogen. That's the bottom line. And I think it can, well, I think it can be done in most places. Legumes also provide forage quality, protein. They're low in fiber, specifically neutral detergent fiber. Forbs, plantain, dandelion, dock, chicory, common milkweed. Plantain's very good for improving or removing soil compaction, but in the ration, the big factor is the copper and zinc that they provide the livestock. Grasses and clovers tend to be suboptimal in terms of copper and zinc. And if you look at all of these, or at least the plantain, dandelion, dock, and chicory, one reason we have them here is they were brought by our ancestors as part of their garden, and specifically medical garden. Dandelion is, from what I've read, is the #1 worldwide medicinal plant, and I'd never thought of that. But if you think about it, if the only thing they provided was zinc and copper, that's enough to make them a medicinal plant if you're deficient in zinc and copper, because you need those two trace minerals for your body to develop immune response. In our case, to a vaccination if you get one, or if you just get exposed to a disease. Whichever way your body is developing an immune response, and I learned this from the cattle, if our calves are deficient in zinc, I can give them all the shots I want to, but the likelihood of them developing that immunity is going to be low if they don't have the trace minerals. Now, you don't need a lot. 10 to 15% of the forage as these forbs is enough to provide what zinc and copper is needed. But the other thing is they do have a high forage quality in terms of, they're like a legume, except they're a little bit lower in protein, which is actually good because many of our pastures are excess in protein. And so having forbs in there, they're also deep-rooted, which helps in terms of soil development. Here's my favorite picture. I've got some orchard grass there, dandelions, white clover, red clover. If you were in this same field and looked over a few feet, I could have gotten fescue in the picture. I just didn't get fescue in this picture. Here's a narrow leaf or buckhorn plantain, dock. This is broadleaf dock versus curly dock. And I hear people wanting to use bird's foot trefoil for the tannins to help in parasite control and better improve nitrogen utilization. And there's a typical plant that is already got a good supply of tannin in it. And if you watch, under rotational grazing, and put in perspective, everything I say from my experience is under rotational grazing versus continuous grazing. And there is a big difference in terms of what the animals learn to eat. But if I turn my cattle out into a pasture like this, they'll be eating the grasses and clovers, then every once in a while they're going to come over here and take a bite of the dock. One day I turned them into a batch of dock, and it was about the size of these two tables here. the whole herd circled around it and were munching on that dock, and it just sounded like they were all eating celery. I wish I'd had a tape recorder. Here's common milkweed. We have a lot of people pushing planting that for the monarch butterfly. When we have it out in a hay field, if you're willing to live with it, it's one way to provide feed for the monarch. And the forage quality of the common milkweed is actually higher than alfalfa. And I've seen cattle eat milkweed when it was over mature, and they would ignore the alfalfa on the same day that was over mature. So again, personal preference. A lot of people say it looks ugly. I'm a dirty farmer if I allow it to stay there. But it has value in terms of the total ecosystem. Citizens of the soil community. We've already hit on them: plant roots, root nodules on the legumes, earthworms, slugs, snails, fungus, all these critters. But the important thing is they provide community services to us. They are working for us. They're fixing nitrogen. They're helping cycle the nutrients. We have what we call shredders, decomposers, and predators. Think about the cow. The cow is the first shredder. She bites off the forage and then chews it, puts it back in the rumen, then later in the day she's going to go lie down somewhere and regurgitate that bolus and chew it some more. She's shredding that forage up so that the bacteria in the rumen can digest it better. We have other shredders in the soil that will continue that process of shredding up organic matter to make it more available. The decomposers are the bacteria and fungus that are actually doing the digestion. But these critters are providing chemicals that develop soil structure. The earthworms are making tunnels that provide macropores. Soil moisture. The organisms are helping us, helping the soil by holding more soil moisture. But something to remember is each one has an optimum environment. One of the best examples is, think of soil pH. If you're growing alfalfa, the alfalfa needs a soil pH of over 6.5. If you're running white clover as your predominant legume, you only need a soil pH of 6 or higher. And if you had Sericea lespedeza, it could be below 6, and it's going to do real well. Now, we usually say that's what the plant needs. When you get right down to it, it's the bacteria in the nodules that are the primary organism responding to that pH. So, just an example of optimum environment. So we talk about the soil food web. Years ago we called it the food chain, plant to grazing animal to predator. But then we realized that there's a lot of cross connection here, and it's not just a linear chain. It is more of a web that we're going through. And we talk about these trophic levels. But as you can see that there's a lot of cross interaction here. We'll talk about that a little bit. Now, getting to some of my favorites, the earthworms. There are 3 niches, so there are 3 types of earthworms. My favorite is the Nightcrawler, maybe because I used to go out and catch them to go fishing. But anyway, a nightcrawler, they make the nice macropore going down deep into the ground. And that allows oxygen to breathe in and out of the soil, allows moisture to go in the soil. And just a hint, something I learned as a kid, if you're looking for nightcrawlers in a drought because you want to go fishing, the nightcrawlers like to, in a drought, get near a dandelion root. So dig up some dandelions and look for the nightcrawlers around the dandelion roots. That's where they, at least that's the experience I have if I was looking for a nightcrawler during a drought. So you've got the nightcrawler, you've got the the nightcrawlers go up and down. You've got another class of earthworms that work sideways, okay? They don't spend much time above the soil surface. Then the third class of worms are the little red worms that will get in the cow pie, the manure patches. Where I come from, we just call them red wigglers, okay? Now, I want you to see this. This is a cow panel over here. What I had done here is we just brought our panels in and set up a working area. And we worked our cattle. They tore the land up. I came back here, I don't remember, a few days afterwards, and look at all the nightcrawlers burrows. They came back up above the ground looking for food, but the cows had pretty well destroyed that part. But the nice thing is I got a good count on the nightcrawler burrows, okay? And what this told me, and I've done this on other parts of the farm, I'm running somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000 nightcrawlers per acre. So you think about that, each one of those is making a nice macropore to allow moisture to go into the soil, to allow oxygen to go into the soil, carbon dioxide to come out. That's a community service. Some people will go out and pay $6,000 to $10,000 for an aerator to run across their pasture. I don't have to do that. And actually, they don't have to do that either if they manage properly. Because the nightcrawlers actually do a better job than the commercial aerator does. Something else to think about is dung beetles. This last winter we bale grazed all of the hay on the farm, and so I have these cow pies around, and I have a chain harrow, and I wanted to see, well, should I chain harrow those cow pies? And I thought, well, let's go look for the dung beetles and see, are the dung beetles active? And so we're talking about April here. And every cow pie that I broke open, I found at least one adult dung beetle. And so that told me, no, I don't want to break out the chain harrow. I need to let the dung beetles alone, let them live there, propagate. And within, well, at our elevation, we'll usually start grazing around the 1st of May. We're up 2,000 feet elevation, so we're slower than you are here. But I'd say by the end of May, those dung beetles had pretty well taken care of all those cow pies that I might have, chain harrowed. So anyway, water infiltration and plant available water. Insects and relatives, we call them arthropods, and this is just a sample of all the different insects that were collected out of a soil sample. You can take a shovel out there and look for them. There are a whole bunch of them. Again, just looking at them, ants, mites, that's not an insect, but other organisms there, springtails, a or Columbella. Dung beetles, that's again one of my favorite ones. Again, 3 niches. Some dung beetles, feed their larvae right within the cow pie. Other ones dig a tunnel underneath the cow pie and deposit, move manure down there and lay their eggs down in those chambers. And then the rollers, they'll take a bunch of that manure and then roll it off away from the cow pie, but again, dig a burrow in the soil, plant the manure down there and lay their eggs on it. But so we're getting organic matter and nutrients moved deeper into the soil, but probably the biggest benefit is the tunnel itself. Again, a way for water to get into the soil, a way for oxygen and carbon dioxide to move in and out. The principle here is that Mother Nature provides redundancy and diversity. Okay? There are 3 niches of the dung beetles, but there are different species at different times of the year that fulfill each of those niches. So, Chris, what was it? What are you telling me you found up to 13 species?
13 species in alpaca pastures.
Yeah, so there are many different species that fulfill these niches at different times of the year. How many of you have 2 tractors on the farm? Okay, that's an example of redundancy, isn't it? Now, if one tractor doesn't work, you can get on the other tractor and go do the job. That's what Mother Nature is doing in terms of redundancy. And then diversity. Slugs and snails, some of them are primary consumers. They will eat your strawberries, I guarantee it, if you have them out there. Some of them are shredders, just taking already dead material and chewing it up, getting some good out of it, but making it smaller for other organisms to use. And until a few years ago, I didn't know there were predatory slugs, but some of them are actually predators. So there are species of slugs that eat other slugs. Bacteria. The important thing to me, one of the important things is the nitrogen fixation. But no, of course, nutrient cycling, they're decomposers. Some bacteria cause diseases. Other bacteria suppress diseases. So they're good and bad bacteria in that sense. And we have to be careful that we're stimulating the good bacteria and not stimulating the bad bacteria. Yes, I talk a lot about water movement and plant available water because the 2 things there are 3 things that determine pasture growth. Day length, temperature, and available water. Okay? Those are the 3 big things. And so, yes, I keep talking about water and nitrogen fixation. Protozoa, they feed on bacteria. We get, again, different types of protozoa. Amoebas, flagellates, they have 1 flagella, and then the ciliates that have a whole bunch of flagella around the outside. Free-living nematodes, there are 4 types. Those that eat bacteria, those that eat fungus, those that eat other nematodes, and those that eat a variety of organisms. Now, these nematodes are different than, think about soybean root knot nematode, or golden nematode that hits white potatoes. those are not free living. They are pests in crops. On the other hand, there are plants that will kill those nematodes. Think sun hemp, crotalaria. If you grow crotalaria and till it into the soil, that will kill many of these parasitic nematodes. So again, plants that can provide a community service for you. The other thing that nematodes do, bacteria will tie up nitrogen, but to be blunt, bacteria don't pee, okay? If a cow eats a lot of grass, she can pee out the excess nitrogen. Bacteria don't do that. They just divide, make another bacteria, and keep going. And they did an experiment where they grew some plants in a pot without nematodes and just bacteria, then another pot with the nematodes, and where there were no nematodes, the bacteria just took up all the nitrogen and it wasn't available to the plant in the pot. Where you had the nematode, they would eat the bacteria and then they could excrete the nitrogen, and that nitrogen was then available to the plants in the pot. So it just shows how these free-living nematodes have a major function in the soil. Nematodes differ in mouth parts based on what they eat. Fungus, they decompose organic matter. An important thing is they make this compound called glomalin, which develops soil structure. They extract nutrients from soils. They also transfer nutrients to other plants. And here's an example of just the mycelium of the fungus interacting with the roots of the plants. Another example of this is a different form of fungus. It's living inside the plant. It's not hurting the plant. It's actually beneficial to the plant, but it just has a different look and feel. This form of fungus actually lives on the surface of the root and can reach out into the soil and extract nutrients and then bring them back and allow the plant to take them up. So basic nutrient cycling, and right now I'm talking nitrogen. Plants fix nitrogen from the air. The plant gets consumed by a herbivore or dies. The herbivore deposits that manure and urine back out on the field. We have other shredders that break the large material into small bits. Bacteria that degrade the sugars, starches. Then different class of bacteria that will consume fibers. And then the fungus and the actinomycetes that get into these less degradable carbohydrates. And in this whole process, they're releasing macro and micronutrients to the plants for the plant uptake. And then once the plant takes it up, the cow can take it up again. Now, interactions. Some that you can think of, it's legume bacteria, in nitrogen fixation. Legume bacteria in grass. And let's just jump over here. In terms of nitrogen fixation, we have bacteria, the rhizobium bacteria, but we also have actinomycetes, this other type of what used to be a bacteria that interact with plants. Different plants work with different microorganisms. Here's an example of some research that was done with ryegrass and ladano clover. They planted them here, and initially there was no benefit to the grass from that white clover. But with time, the white clover developed the nodules and was able to start fixing nitrogen. And out here, after a number of weeks, February to March, April, about 3 or 4 months, that legume was providing the nitrogen needed by the grass. And this is one reason sometimes we will recommend a small dose of nitrogen on the new seeding, even though there's legume in the seeding, just to give some nitrogen to that grass to get it going until the legume and that bacteria has a chance to get going to actually provide the nitrogen to the stand. And again, the primary source of nitrogen from a legume to the pasture is through the animal feeding. The animal feeds, digests the plant. Nitrogen comes out primarily in the urine, but some in the feces. Root nodules may die once that plant's been defoliated, providing nitrogen. But we also do get interactions through fungus in the soil that will transfer nitrogen and phosphorus between the plants and between the soil and the plant. Now, nematodes, mites, and fungus. Nematodes eat bacteria. Mites eat nematodes. Nematodes eat fungus. And fungus eat nematodes. And I find this fungus fascinating. It's the original lasso. Okay, so this, or you could call it a snare if you're a trapper, whichever way you want to call it. But this fungus makes this lasso, and when the nematode goes through it, it closes up on it and catches the nematode, and then the fungus digests the nematode. Now, just out of curiosity, look at the mouth part. That happens to be a bacteria eating nematode. And you can tell that because of that small mouth there. So, healthy soil ecology starts with food supply, soil organic matter. We do want to have adequate macro and micronutrients there. We can't do a whole lot on micronutrients. I mean, we can buy them, but when we're buying fertilizer, we're buying basically macronutrients, P and K. That'll hang around for a while. Lime will actually carry some of the micronutrients, so there is merit in the lime for the micronutrients. The physical environment, cover and habitat at all scales. I mean, the earthworm, that's fairly easy for us to see, but we also have to have the habitat down in the soil, something that you and I don't normally look at. If we get a shovel out there, and there'll be people that take you out on field days, you dig a sample, smell the soil. You can, from the smell of the soil, you can tell good things and bad things about the soil. We need to have healthy consumers. All of these critters we want to have nice and healthy. What we can control is the chemical environment, pH through lime, fertility, which you'll hear quite a bit more about. But the soil oxygen, again, I go back to my Nightcrawlers. I got 75,000 to 100,000 per acre doing that job for me. As long as they can make those macropores, then that oxygen can go into the soil and carbon dioxide can come out. Thermal and moisture environment. Chris will talk about that. In hot weather, we need to have adequate cover so that the soil doesn't overheat. Now, I'll argue in cold weather, especially up in my region, sometimes it's beneficial to graze it a little closer to get light down in the base of the canopy to develop tillers and actually keep the soil a little warmer, maybe. So, soil pH 6 to 7, depending on the legume. We'd like our P and K in the optimum range, but not above optimum. It's a waste of money if it's above optimum. Inoculate the legume with the proper bacteria. Manage the nutrients on the farm. Recycle manure, especially the urine. Okay, that's where most of the potassium is, and much of the nitrogen is in the urine. All the organic residues. Proper timing of grazing, and I'm emphasizing rotational grazing here. Proper fall grazing to develop tillers in the grass and stolons in the white clover. This also comes back to, a lot of people don't realize the major, or a major predator of white clover is this clover root cuculio. I'm assuming you have it here. I know we have it in Virginia and West Virginia. But rotational grazing is a good way of reducing that. And a little bit of nitrogen, 25 to 50 pounds of nitrogen in the fall causes the legume to slough its nodules, and the baby clover root cuculio need nodules to feed on. So by making the legume slough the nodule, you tend to cause the baby cuculios to starve to death. So, again, under rotational grazing, we want to rest the pasture, get cover for the night crawlers. And if you think about it, if you have a continuously grazed pasture where you can see a lot of soil, you are not providing a good habitat for night crawlers. Cattle and earthworms are similar. They both prefer legumes to grasses. They'll eat grass, but they do better if there's some legumes in the stand. Fly control, you want to use a friendly a fly control system that is friendly to dung beetles. Weed control that's friendly to legumes and soil microorganisms. And my emphasis here today, I hope, is to get you to think differently about what is a weed. Not all forbs are weeds, okay? Plantains and dandelions, I'd hope you don't look at them as weeds. Look at them as a forb. This is good forage that is beneficial to my animals. And if you really want to get radical, then add that definition to your dock, your curly dock and broadleaf dock, and some of these other forbs that are there. Co-graze livestock, convert the weeds to animal feeds. So, take home. Manage plants to capture solar energy, cycle nutrients. You want a sustainable system. Your management's going to influence the soil organic matter. You may need to add some macronutrients through fertilizer. Your management's going to be the big thing that allows these critters to develop that the soil structure that gives you the water infiltration and the water holding capacity of the soil. And it's your management that is going to affect the community. And there are some calves. And I just want to give credit to the NRCS website, where I snitched some of the photographs that I used today. Any questions? Now that's the best cow in the world right there. I just want you to know that. That cow would stand there and let my grandchildren milk her in the field, and all she would do is she'd just turn her head and watch them. The other thing she would do is, if you had orchard grass here with horse nettle growing over it, she'd take the horse nettle, set it over to the side, and eat the orchard grass. So, my pet cow. Also, I had a calf every year, and one of the best calves going. So, yes, sir. Yes. Yes. And I will send them to you. Actually, there is a paper in the talk, rather in the in your handout. No, I'm just saying. Bear with me. The proceedings article. There is a proceedings article there. That was the talk I thought I was supposed to give until I reread the flyer. So you've actually, anybody that wants the slides, just send me an email. I'll send you the slides of this talk, but then you have the other talk in the proceedings.
I do want to, is there any other questions, Fred? There's a couple questions right here.
Intrigued me with the copper and zinc on those, do they retain that benefit in hay?
It measures in hay, yes. I mean, I'm saying what I'm saying through forage testing, and yes, it holds up in hay, and both the curly dock and the plantain, I've seen cattle go in there in round bales and pick out the weed, the forbs. We're not supposed to call them weeds, the forbs, and eat them before they would eat the grass. Any of these plants that the cattle eat, yeah, don't fight it. Now, again, cattle do a better job eating these forbs under rotational grazing than continuous grazing. And I'm going to give you the extreme case. Under a continuous grazed pasture, my cattle would not eat Canada thistle. But when I moved to a different farm and all they had was rotational grazing, they learned to eat Canada thistle on their own. And you can go on the web, help me with the name, the lady, Cows Eat Weeds. Yeah, Kathy. Kathy Voth has a video on how you can train cattle to eat Canada thistle. But my point is that cattle can learn to do it on their own under rotational grazing. Kathy Voth, yeah, on Pasture, yeah, onpasture.com.
Now, I think it's important to remember, Ed, we don't want all forms of pasture, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, 15% on the upper side. Now, let's put that in perspective too. If I've been bale grazing, now right where those cattle trumped up the ground, I might have plantain that is the predominant part of the pasture in that area where I had the hoof traffic the summer after bale grazing. But then if I come back a year later, now the plantain has loosened up the soil, and now I'm going to have grasses and legumes in that area that was predominantly plantain the previous year. So. I'm encouraging you to think about that, yes, seriously. Now, first of all, the only place I have milkweed is in hay fields that are grazed in the aftermath. In those paddocks that are just pasture, there is no milkweed. And why? Because the cows are eating it. Now, in the hay field, I might get a little milkweed in the hay, but the bulk of the milkweed comes on in the aftermath. And okay, I'm a little crazy, and I'll remove all doubt. No, you've heard that. My neighbors think I'm crazy, so now I'm going to remove all doubt. Remember my background. I was wildlife management. A friend of mine taught me that common milkweed is actually a good food for humans. It tastes like spinach. It really does. Okay, steam it, put butter on it, a little salt. You do have to cook it. So I mainly played around with milkweed on the farm just for me. Then I learned how the cows like it. Put cows in a field where they're used to eating milkweed, and you get those pods. And I've seen my cows go through and pick the pods like okra. At least the way I'd eat okra. You like it tender and young. Now the other thing, another good area to study is Fred Provenza's work out of the Utah State. Do you remember his website?
I'm trying to think, he's got a really nice publication.
Oh yeah, he's a number. Okay, and bear with me. We're both showing our age. We can't remember everything that we'd like to. And I have a head start, so I'm allowed to forget more than Chris is. Okay, Fred Provenza over his professional lifetime has shown that animals learn to eat, know what they eat. And you can see this behavior in the herd. As cattle go along in a pasture, a cow's eating here, this cow is eating over here, and she looks over there and then runs over here and tries to figure out what this cow's eating. So cattle learn from each other. And that's one big problem with, if you were to buy cattle or sheep from a farm that has, well, let's use the classic example. If I have cattle or sheep coming from an orchard grass, bluegrass farm, and they go to a toxic tall fescue farm, those animals are going to have a hard time adjusting to that new feed because they've not been exposed to that plant and those toxicities. And so there are a number of cases that experiences where people have had major catastrophes making that move. And I've seen it in sheep, just between coming from a bluegrass pasture to an orchard grass pasture. The sheep did not want to graze the orchard grass. But if you had another flock of sheep that was raised on the orchard grass, they had no problem with it. So okay, I have gotten away from using the pasture drag for spreading manure. Now, that doesn't mean I will never use the pasture drag. Sometimes in bale feeding, you're going to have, you may have what you call a catastrophe, where it turned out real wet and you tore up a lot of your, in my case, hayfield. And I thought I had destroyed, 5 acres one year because of all the rain I had. And so in this case, I would say, sorry, dung beetles, but you'll have to deal with it yourself. Anyway, I went into that site, broadcast a seeding mix, and took the chain harrow over and chain harrowed it. The next year, I had the best hay meadow you could ever want. I could show you pictures of the hay meadow just before I seeded it, and you would say, boy, that's terrible. And it was. But with the chain harrow and the seeding mix, the next year, like I said, it was the best hay field I ever had. So there is a place for the chain harrow, but I think we want to pick and choose when we use it. And I've chosen not to use it in those years. Well, like this year, for whatever reason, we had the rainfall. The dung beetles broke down the manure. The grass came back, and by second cut, and I can show you pictures if you want to look at them, by second cut you could hardly tell a hay bale had been fed there. You have to look real close. And that was without the pasture drag.
All right, we probably need to move on to our next speaker. Let's think.
Behave.net.
Yeah, thank you. Behave. Thank you, Mike. Yep.
Behave.com. Behave.net is
Thank you.
let's thank Ed for that wonderful talk.